Hey everybody, this is Troy and Dr. Cory here again with Body Talk and Advanced Spine Joint and Wellness. Hey, if you want to find us, you can go to iTunes. You can search Body Talk. If you like the podcast, give us a thumbs up or you leave a review. And if you're on Facebook Live, feel free to fire off any questions that you have. And if you want to look for us, you can find us on ohiopain.com or reach us directly 330-242-7669. So hey, we're wrapping up this first little series that we've started today on inflammation, and it's led us to this last topic, eh?
Stress
and sleep. So this is a fun one. How many Americans do you think don't sleep good?
Everybody. In some capacity, people are lack of sleep, whether it be, family issues causing stress, job, just day-to-day activities. Stress is, goes hand in hand with sleep, and sleep is sometimes hard to come by. It's tough sometimes.
Yeah, it's the easiest thing too. I think a lot of Americans, we just live these crazy busy lives. All of us do. And I think the easiest thing that we can start to trim to try to pack more into a day, sleep.
No, for sure. It's next to diet and daily exercise. I think it's the number one thing up there to change, to really impact your lifestyle. With lack of sleep, you get extra stress. So, we were talking earlier, it sends hormones into a downward spiral. And when you affect one, other ones are affected down the cascade way. So it's really important.
Sure. I think for patients that we see each and every day, we work with a lot of chronic pain patients. And when it comes to chronic pain, of course, poor sleep affects hormones, which we'll talk about in a second, that help with healing. Mm-hmm. One of the other problems too is that, poor sleep or lack of sleep when you're in pain, or just in general, if you don't sleep well, can also begin to pack on the pounds.
Yep.
So the old LBs begin to catch up. Mm-hmm. And that can create problems too, because the more you start to carry around, the more the joints start to hurt, and it begins to kind of create a vicious cycle.
Yep.
So let's talk about some of the things that we see with hormones and sleep. And let's talk about cortisol first. This is kind of an obvious one.
It's a good one.
Yeah, so everybody knows about this one. Maybe talk a little bit about cortisol.
So cortisol is probably the first response to stress the body releases.
Sure.
Obviously, it's emitted into the bloodstream in short bursts. So obviously more stress, a bigger burst, and it's entering the bloodstream. And when that happens, it affects our body in ways of, we'll get fatigue. Brain fog, if people feeling just kind of hazy at work or just day to day, they just feel like they're just not with it. The biggest thing you talk about with weight gain, it definitely increases or changes the sensitivities to salt and sweets. So if you feel yourself craving a salty or sweet and snacking here and there, that'll add up. And when you combine that with the fatigue and just kind of sluggishness, you're not exercising, so it's a vicious little circle there, just slowly gaining on the weight, and just it's going to feed into that inflammation cycle we talked about in previous weeks. Mm-hmm. And that's just it's a very walking the fine line there, because if you cross that line, you could fall down this little hill that you just keep rolling and tumble out of control if you don't know how to get under control. And it's not meaning going to the doctor and getting meds, but it's just sitting back and thinking, okay, what modifications do I have to do to get out of this cycle? And sleep, like we said, is the first and easiest way to do that.
Yeah.
So,
well, cortisol is a big one, and a lot of people have heard it. You see things advertised on television. Hey, take this little tablet or something. It decreases cortisol. But cortisol then starts to lead to another issue, which leads us into another hormone problem that we can talk about. And excess cortisol really starts to lead to glucose production. So we start to get elevated glucose production. Then we start to see insulin resistance. So insulin resistance creates issues. Then we see insulin production.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. More insulin we produce, then we're going to start packing away the pounds. So you start with this insulin resistance, and insulin is also very associated, of course, with inflammation.
Yep.
More insulin we have floating around, then we start to see more inflammatory issues begin to occur. So these two kind of go like, Forrest Gump, peas and carrots.
No, for sure. And you add that to the Western diet that everybody's acquainted to eating, high carbs, added sugars. That's a little recipe for disaster there if you're not paying close attention. So it can be a dangerous thing.
And you mentioned too that, cortisol starts to give you some of these cravings, some of the cravings for sweets, things like this. So of course, we start eating more carbs, more complex carbs, things like this, or simple carbs. And then we start to see more of a pro-inflammatory diet. And we start to snowball even further.
Horrible time too with Thanksgiving coming up. Just sweets and salties just everywhere. It's no good.
It's funny that we're talking about sleep with this time change too. When it comes to circadian rhythms, circadian rhythms is something that really affects sleep too. And this is a big one. This time change thing. I don't know if you guys feel it, but I'm 45 now. I felt this one this year.
It's big time. And people think when that time change and you get a lack of sleep, they're just like, oh, I'll just get 4 or 5 more hours sleep the next day. It's actually not that easy. So when you mess up that circadian rhythm, that sleep cycle, it could take days, weeks, and sometimes if your body's not, finely tuned enough, it could take months to get back into that normal sleeping pattern. So it's a long process. So, make sure that we're getting, set time away that, we want to decompress at night. Turn off all TVs, computer screens, cell phones, people lay in bed with your phones. It's not a good thing because as we start those bright lights are going to affect that rhythm and the way we fall asleep. So being able to set time aside to decompress at night and fall asleep and get into a good pattern is a really good way to monitor that.
Yeah, that's for sure. And, sleep, it really is, I think, something that a lot of people, it gets overlooked.
Yeah.
And when it comes to weight loss, one of the two things, I always talk with patients about is number one, water.
Yep.
Number two, sleep.
Nope, sure.
You got to start balancing hormones. Let's talk a little bit about two others. And these are manufactured when we sleep. Okay. So we actually need to sleep for these two to be manufactured, and both men and women need them. They help with inflammation. They help with healing. They help with lean muscle mass. They help with, just mental clarity, energy, focus. And that's growth hormone and testosterone.
Okay.
So let's talk about each one specifically. Growth hormone. Growth hormone is manufactured when we sleep.
Okay.
So, if we don't sleep, we start to see growth hormone levels decline. And growth hormone is one that a lot of men and women don't realize that they need, but has a tremendous impact on our health and our overall well-being. When we work in the anti-aging clinic here that's attached to us, growth hormone is one that, the time I'll pull this one out is when we're really talking with people about sleep issues, chronic joint aches and pains, lean muscle mass, and it is just a night and day difference. But if we're not sleeping, this is the only time that we manufacture this. Mm-hmm. So sleep is poor when it comes to chronic pain issues. I'll just rattle a few off: fibromyalgia, your lupus, Crohn's disease. If you look at rheumatoid arthritis, things like this, those are chronic inflammatory conditions. And if you aren't sleeping, you can't manufacture growth hormone, and your inflammation goes unchecked. We have, as we talked about, cortisol and insulin typically out of balance, creating a pro-inflammatory state. And now we're actually losing one of our anti-inflammatories. So growth hormone is a big one, and it's very easy to work with and very easy to measure. Let's talk about the other one, testosterone. Okay. Testosterone's big too. How many women out there, do you think really understand how much you actually need testosterone, especially with chronic pain?
Probably very little. I mean, mostly when we talk about testosterone men, estrogen women, some people just don't realize there's both of those in men and women. Mm-hmm. So they play an intricate role. So,
well,
sure.
And most men don't realize they need estrogen. Mm-hmm. So that's a big one too. There's a lot of estrogen dominance in men out there. But testosterone is needed for both men and women for almost identical reasons that someone might need growth hormone. So, testosterone helps us with just overall state of well-being. Many men and women out there have been diagnosed with maybe depression, and maybe it's not true clinical depression, it's more dysthymia, mm-hmm. Just kind of lack of motivation or just kind of lack of enjoyment in things we're doing, but they're still functioning. They're going to work, they're taking care of their kids, things like this. You're still functioning, but it's not necessarily depression, it's more dysthymia. So we see that a lot with lower testosterone levels in both men and women. Anxiety is another one as well, when testosterone levels begin to decrease and people don't really realize it. Maybe they see the family doctor and oftentimes they put them on antidepressants. So, the number one side effect of antidepressants, right? Weight gain. So it begins to complicate, weight loss and weight gain issues as well when we start to see those things. But testosterone for both men and women, significant impact when it comes to those things. And then we'll talk about this last one. And these are all there's not a ton of these to talk about, but let's talk about ghrelin. You familiar with ghrelin?
Yep, hunger.
Yeah. Yep. So when we don't sleep well, we start to see this one produced in actually abnormal amounts. Yep. So when we don't sleep well, you see cortisol levels go up, and you had mentioned that can start to stimulate, some hunger response and maybe some cravings for sugar and things that aren't great for us. But ghrelin's a big one too, and many people have never even heard of this one. So if you're out there, Ghrelin, you can research it. Ghrelin. The more of this you produce, what happens?
Hungrier you get.
Hungrier you get. So this one stimulates our hunger production, and cortisol and ghrelin are really working against you if you're not sleeping well out there. So with these things in mind, with these hormones that we've rattled off, let's maybe talk a little bit about sleep hygiene.
Sleep hygiene.
Sleep hygiene. What's something that the average person out there who's listening, what can they do to start working on, making it so they sleep better?
What can they do? Well, one is drinking water. I mean, this is plenty. So we always come back to that with everything we talk about water. Hydration is really important. Making sure the body's nice and hydrated. And like I said, I feel like the biggest thing for sleep hygiene is just scheduling out your things throughout the day. I mean, I know it's lifestyle changes. It's a little bit different than things we talk about here, but setting away time to do certain things, making sure you have a work schedule, and don't deviate from that. I mean, I know people have a lot of things to do, but when that time comes, you're like, all right, I'm done working for the day. Let's do something that's going to relax me a little bit. So reading is what people like to do. So put a little time to read, decompress, moving into that, time to get ready to go to bed. So having a nice little routine, whether it be brushing your teeth, taking a warm shower, things like that to get into a rhythm, and then going to night. Because the more we deviate, the more just pushes us to do things that we don't want to do throughout the day. So if today I'm gonna work a little bit later, okay, well you might start doing that every single day, and that's going to decrease. Like you normally get 8 hours of sleep. Pushing that schedule further down the road, you might get 6, 5, and it kind of compiles and throwing off that sleep cycle. So I think lifestyle changes are a big thing, and making sure we have a good set schedule to the things that we want to do. And then I tailor into the diet side of things, making sure that we're eating cleaner, staying away from those heavy meals later in the evening, because the easy way to do it, is when if a bear's chasing you, it's fight or flight, and your body's going.
Yeah.
At night it's rest and digest. So your body's going to slow down and work on processes to digest whatever's in your stomach. And if you're not super active, which you aren't when you're sleeping, I hope not. I hope people don't be running marathons when they're sleeping. It'd be really dangerous.
Right.
But our caloric need is going to be a lot lower. So anything we do eat in the end of the day, I mean, it takes 2.5 to 3 hours for your stomach to completely digest. If you have a big meal, you're just going to be sleeping and not doing anything. So those fat storages are going to be ones that, pick up. And like you said, it's a time to heal. So the best way I say to bake a cake is to have good ingredients. So if you're hurting, eating things that are going to promote healing. So, a lot of fiber, leafy greens, things high in nutrients. You could even a little bit of protein in the evening to build up if you're working out or dealing with, injuries. Those proteins, broken down to amino acids are really important to heal. So making sure we're not only lifestyle, but putting the right components in our body to heal throughout the night and get a good sleep. So
yeah, and when it comes to sleep hygiene, a lot of patients don't realize that certain screens are actually really bad for us. You mentioned this earlier. There's blue lights in the screen. There's some good studies on blue lights and what it does to us when we're watching these televisions, these new. I don't know what these
LED.
These things TVs and iPads and your iPhones, things like this emit this blue light, which is actually a stimulant. So it stimulates us. And a lot of the leading sleep researchers tell us in the bedroom, bedroom's only for two things, hanky panky and sleep. So we really shouldn't be, watching these screens. So we don't want anything in the bedroom if you have trouble sleeping that may stimulate us. So these screens are typically very, very bad for us. So avoiding those things. And you mentioned, routines, things like that. For people that have having trouble sleeping, they also talk about, trying to do things in the last hour of being awake that are very relaxing or calming. So maybe some biofeedback, yoga, get in a hot tub, like you said, take a hot shower, do something outside of sitting in bed and reading and watching a screen. Because if you're doing that and you're not sleeping, it's likely part of the problem. So trying something natural and simple to start creating better routines for the evening. So sleep's a big one.
So talking about screens, so if you are someone that has your phone on you or needs to do something in the middle of the night, check email. So most smartphones, I don't know if you can see, you can actually, like the iPhone, if I drag down here and I have my little screen thing here, if I click on it, it'll actually let you go into a dark mode or like a night mode. It'll actually take off the blue lights. It'll be a more red hue. So I mean, it's not ideal, but if you have to use a device, most devices are like that. So it's nice to have. Obviously, like you said, we want to keep those things out of the room. But if you're at a job that requires you to have your email or if something's going on, that you need a family emergency or have something by you, turning on that night mode is definitely beneficial. It's a
great suggestion.
Yeah.
Daytime and closer to the evening as well. A lot of people, because they feel crummy when they aren't getting poor sleep, obviously they have daytime sleepiness and they start to kind of get a little drowsy in the afternoon. Stimulants. Yeah, not a great idea.
No, I'm bad at that. I'm a person that, after work I'll go work out. Well, so if you got to work at 7 o'clock, taking a pre-workout or some, B12 or some stuff like that really gets your body going.
Yeah.
Takes quite a few hours to run those out of your system. So, or people drink coffee late at night, that caffeine level, it gets you going. So
Yeah.
it's definitely something to stay away from, in the evening.
Well, we see a lot of it in, we'll talk about this one, and I think we'll wrap up because we'll, of course, run out of time so dang fast. But, when we take a lot of these stimulants and we're not sleeping well, adrenal fatigue.
Yep.
So we start throwing ourselves into adrenal fatigue. And I don't think a lot of medical doctors and family docs and sometimes even us, we overlook this one. And it really is a big one for pain and getting folks to rest. Adrenal fatigue is a big one. And if you're on adrenal fatigue, where now maybe you aren't producing some of the hormones that we need as much, there's some supplementary hormones that we begin to produce that impact sleep, and that's epinephrine, norepinephrine. So as we get into adrenal fatigue and we need energy, our body's going to call for it, and it's going to call for something. And if our adrenal glands can't respond appropriately with the hormones they're supposed to, because they're so chronically burnt out, that's when we start to see the epinephrine, norepinephrine. And if you do a lot of sleep counseling, like I talk with a lot of guys down in the age management or anti-aging clinic, and a lot of guys that have trouble sleeping will feel like their heart begins to race a little bit at night, like they're on coffee for some reason. And epinephrine, norepinephrine, still floating around all day long. We're under this extreme fatigue. We've taken things, coffee, maybe some B12, that, 8-hour energy?
Something like that, 6 hour, whatever it's called,
Yeah, those things, or maybe just some B vitamins just to keep things clipping along. And the adrenal glands are torched, so now they're just throwing out anything they can, and they're just pushing out epinephrine, norepinephrine. So when it comes time to sleep, if you feel like you are wide awake, that's exactly why.
And you said too, those men, they feel like their heart is racing, and if it actually is, that heartbeat is increased, doing that for a long period of time could largely lead to cardiovascular issues too. So this is just not just weight gain, weight loss, and stress. This could definitely affect other supplement or other organ systems in our body. So it's very intricate, but it needs to stay in proper balance because we don't want the good old ticker to go out on us.
Well, yeah, and poor sleep begins to start to throw us into a lot of when it's associated with the old metabolic syndrome. High blood pressure, high cholesterol, so it starts to throw us into these things. Did you have a question come in? I heard a little button there. Oh, okay. So it starts to throw us into this metabolic syndrome, as we know, then starts to run down the cascade of all those things.
Yep.
Diabetes, insulin resistance, heart disease, and it begins kind of that slippery slope. So if you're out there and sleep's an issue, and I know this whole series that was on inflammation, and this does dovetail right into inflammation. If you feel like you're having problems with this, and maybe it's just sleep and you can't figure it out, first thing to do is come in and get your hormones checked. Get a big blood draw so we can find out what's going on. If you're in chronic pain and you can't sleep, maybe you need to get looked at physically so we can identify physical sources of inflammation. Maybe do a nutrition consult, identify some of those nutritional factors, and do a blood draw so we can figure out what in the world is going on. And if you remember, if we take this all the way back around to where we started, inflammation, physical sources, environmental, and then stress and sleep. So I think that about wraps this one up.
Sounds good to me.
Final thoughts?
Covered a lot. Well, final thoughts. Well, as a doctor or just anybody out there, we talk about adrenal fatigue, things running out, things like that. You can't fill an empty glass with an empty pitcher. So making sure that pitcher stays full, which is us, whether you're, like I said, a doctor, a teacher, a parent, taking care of a family member or something like that. Just making sure you're taking the time out to do things that you enjoy, those things to de-stress you or, relax you before you go to sleep. Making sure we're eating good diets and taking, time for some self-care. Because if you run out of whatever you're trying to give, you're not going to give anything. It's just going to tear you down too. So self-care is huge. So
yeah, you can only take so much.
Yep.
So next week, I think what we'll do is we'll go into maybe a 2 or 3 week series into diabetes, type 2 diabetes, which I think this transitions into great. And then into neuropathy, which is a huge diabetic complication affecting a large amount of the population with diabetes out there.
Diabetes type 2, it runs in the family, right? That's what you hear all the time, but
it really does. I think it runs in the family of us here in the whole country as a family.
Much so.
So it is a big problem.
Yep.
It's becoming a bigger problem, more prevalent. We're starting to see type 2 diabetes in kids.
That's bad.
And that's scary because it was in folks almost only isolated to over 40.
Yep.
So now we're seeing it in kids with this insulin resistance resistance. So it's a big one to talk about. So we'll talk about diabetes and then the number one complication, neuropathy. And then I think we'll drive into some pain points. We'll get into some joint issues on a series then after that. So until next time, you can go to iTunes. You can find us under Body Talk. You can contact us directly by going to our website, ohiopain.com, or you can reach out 330-242-7669. Until next time.
Sounds good.